Lyra pressed her small body deeper into the gap beneath the broken shuttle. She was 7 years old and she had never been so afraid in her life. Her blue skin was covered in dust and ash. Her two hearts beat so fast that she felt sick. Above her, through the twisted metal, she could see the orange glow of burning buildings. The soldiers had come at dawn. They came with ships that blocked out the sun and weapons that turned everything to fire. Lyra had been eating breakfast with her mother and father when the first explosion hit their home. Her father had grabbed her hand and pulled her outside. Her mother had screamed something, but Lyra could not hear the words over the noise. Then there was another explosion, and Lyra was alone. She had run. She did not know where she was running. She just ran until her legs gave out, and then she crawled under the first hiding place she could find. That was hours ago. Now the suns were setting and the screams had mostly stopped. That scared her more than the screams themselves. Heavy footsteps crunched on broken glass nearby. Lyra covered her mouth with both hands to stop herself from crying out. Through a small hole in the wreckage, she saw boots. They were not boots. These were different, heavier, made of dark material she did not recognize. The boots stopped. A voice spoke in a language she did not understand. Then another voice responded. The boots moved again and Lyra heard more footsteps, more soldiers. She counted 4 pairs of boots. One of them was very close now. Lyra held her breath. A tear rolled down her cheek and fell onto the ground. In the terrible silence, it sounded as loud as a gunshot. The boots turned toward her hiding place. A face appeared in the gap. It was a strange face, different from any species Lyra knew. The skin was a warm brown color. The eyes were dark and shaped differently than hers. The face had no markings, no scales, no extra features. Just smooth skin, dark hair cut very short, and those searching eyes. The creature saw her. Lyra wanted to scream, but no sound came out. She pushed herself backward, but there was nowhere to go. The metal pressed against her back. The strange soldier held up one hand slowly. He spoke in universal standard, the common language of the galaxy. His accent was thick and his words were simple. "Safe," he said. "You safe, I help." Lyra shook her head. She did not believe him. Why would anyone help her? They had killed everyone. Everyone was dead. The soldier looked over his shoulder and called out to the others. Then he turned back to Lyra. Very slowly, he reached into his uniform and pulled out something small. It was a piece of food wrapped in clear material. He placed it on the ground and pushed it toward her. "Eat," he said. "Then we go. Bad soldiers come back soon, must leave." Lyra stared at the food. Her stomach hurt from hunger. She had not eaten since breakfast, and that felt like a lifetime ago. Slowly, carefully, she reached out and took it. The soldier smiled. It was a tired smile and sad, but it was real. He pointed at himself. "One," he said, "my name, One Park Human Earth." Lyra had heard of humans. They were new to this part of the galaxy. Her teacher had shown the class pictures of their planet, a blue and green world very far away. She had never met one before. "Lyra," she whispered. It was the first word she had spoken in hours. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. One nodded. "Lyra, good name. Now we go, Lyra. I carry you, okay?" She did not answer, but when he reached for her, she did not pull away. His hands were gentle as he lifted her from the wreckage. He held her against his chest, and she could feel the hard material of his armor beneath his uniform. Another human soldier ran up to them. This one had lighter skin and yellow hair. He spoke quickly in that strange language Lyra did not know. One responded sharply. The other soldier shook his head but said nothing more. They started moving. One carried Lyra through streets that she no longer recognized. Everything was broken. Everything was burned. She saw bodies on the ground, and one shifted her in his arms so that her face was against his shoulder. "Don't look," he said softly. "Close eyes, I have you." She closed her eyes and held onto his uniform. She could hear his breathing, steady and strong. She could hear his heartbeat, just one, beating slowly even as he ran. An explosion erupted somewhere behind them. One stumbled but did not fall. Lyra heard him grunt in pain. Something hot hit her back, but one's body blocked most of it. He had turned at the last moment to shield her. They kept moving. One was breathing harder now. Lyra could feel wetness spreading across his back where her hands held him. "Almost there," he said. His voice was strained. "Ship waiting, you go on ship. Ship takes you away from here, safe place." They reached a clearing where a large transport ship waited with its doors open. Other refugees were climbing aboard, survivors with the same blue skin and frightened eyes as Lyra. One handed her to another human, a woman with kind eyes who carried her into the ship. But Lyra reached back toward him. "Wait," she called. "Your name again, please." He looked at her, this small human soldier covered in blood and ash. He reached up and pulled a small patch from his uniform. It showed a picture of a planet with wings on either side. He pressed it into her hand. "One Park," he said. "Remember, little one, be strong." The ship's doors began to close. Lyra watched him through the narrowing gap. He raised one hand in farewell. Then the doors sealed shut, and the ship rose into the burning sky, carrying her away from everything she had ever known. She never let go of the patch. Lyra stood before the mirror in her small apartment on the... She was no longer a frightened child hiding under broken metal. She was 19 years old, tall and graceful, with the deep blue skin and silver eyes of her people. She worked as a junior in the foreign ministry, a position she had earned through years of hard work and determination. On the table beside her bed sat a small wooden box. Inside the box lay an old patch, faded and worn from years of handling, a planet with wings. She touched it every morning and every night. It was her most precious possession. Today was the day she had been waiting for since she first heard the news 3 months ago. The Galactic Concord was holding a peace summit, and for the first time in decades, humanity had been invited to send a formal delegation. They had offered to host the event, and Lyra had requested, begged, and finally been assigned to the human delegation's welcome detail. She had searched for one park many times over the years. Human military records were difficult to access, and her searches had returned nothing useful. She did not know if he had survived the war. She did not know if he had returned to Earth. She did not even know if he remembered her. But she remembered him. Every day for 12 years she remembered. The welcoming ceremony was held in the Grand Hall of a beautiful building made of white stone and crystal that caught the light of the twin suns. Hundreds of delegates from dozens of species filled the hall, their voices creating a constant hum of conversation. Lyra stood with the other junior staff near the main entrance, watching as each delegation arrived. The delegation came first. Lyra felt her jaw tighten as she watched them enter. Tall, gray-skinned beings with sharp features and cold eyes. She knew that not all were evil. She knew that many of them had opposed the attacks on Prime. But her body remembered the fear, and her hands trembled slightly until they passed. Then came the humans. There were 12 of them, diplomats in formal clothes, advisors carrying data tablets, and security officers in crisp uniforms. Lyra studied each face as they entered. Her hearts were beating fast, just like they had beaten that day under the broken shuttle. She saw a man in the middle of the group. He was in his late 30s, with short dark hair touched by gray at the temples. His skin was the same warm brown she remembered. He walked with perfect military posture, but she noticed a slight stiffness in his movement, as if old injuries still troubled him. A thin scar ran along his jaw. His name tag read, Captain D. Park. Lyra stopped breathing. It was him. Older now, harder around the edges, but it was him. The same eyes. The same face that had appeared in the gap of her hiding place all those years ago. She wanted to run to him. She wanted to call his name, but her feet would not move and her voice had disappeared. He walked past her without a glance, his eyes scanning the room for potential threats. He did not see her. Why would he? She was just another face in a crowd of thousands. The delegation moved deeper into the hall, and then they were gone. Lyra stood frozen for a long moment. Other staff members moved around her, busy with their duties, but she could not think clearly. He was here. He was alive. After 12 years, he was standing in the same building as her. The next 3 days were torture. Lyra saw one many times, always from a distance. He stood guard during meetings. He walked the halls with other security officers. He ate alone in the dining areas, his eyes always watching, always careful. She wanted to approach him, but fear held her back. What if he did not remember? The rescue that had shaped her entire life might have been just another moment in a long career of violence for him. Soldiers saved people. It was their job. Why would he remember one small girl among all the others? On the evening of the third day, there was a reception for all the delegates and staff. Lyra wore her best dress, a simple dark blue garment that matched her skin. In her pocket, she carried the old patch. She had not planned to bring it. Her hand had simply reached for it as she left her room. She found one standing alone near a window. He held a glass of water, untouched. His eyes watched the crowd, but there was a distant look in them, as if his mind was somewhere else entirely. Lyra walked toward him. Each step felt like walking through deep water. Her hands were shaking. Her mouth was dry, but she kept walking until she stood before him. He looked at her. His expression was polite but guarded. "Can I help you?" he asked. His voice was deeper than she remembered, rougher. Lyra opened her mouth, but the words she had practiced 1,000 times would not come. Instead, she asked a simple question. "Do you remember Prime?" Something changed in his face. The polite mask cracked just slightly. His hand tightened around the glass. "I remember," he said quietly. Lyra reached into her pocket and pulled out the patch. She held it out to him, this faded piece of fabric that she had carried across years and light years. One stared at it. His face went pale. He set down his glass very carefully, as if he was afraid his hands might shake. "The little girl," he whispered, "under the shuttle." "You told me to close my eyes," Lyra said. Her voice was unsteady now, thick with emotion. "You told me you had me. You told me I was safe." He looked up at her face, really looked for the first time, and she saw recognition dawn in his eyes, followed by something that might have been wonder. "Lyra," he said, "your name was Lyra." She nodded, unable to speak. Tears were forming in her eyes. One reached out slowly and took the patch from her hand. He held it like it was made of glass, turning it over in his fingers. "You kept it," he said, "all this time." "It saved my life," Lyra said. "You saved my life, I never forgot." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The noise of the reception faded away. There was only the two of them, a soldier and the girl he had carried out of hell. "I thought about you," one said finally. "For years, I wondered if you made it, if you were okay." He paused. "I never thought I would see you again." Lyra smiled through her tears. "I looked for you. I searched every record I could find. I was afraid you were dead." He shook his head slowly. "Still here, still standing." He looked at her again, at the woman she had become, and something in his expression softened. "You grew up," he said. "Because of you," she replied. The patch sat between them, a small piece of fabric carrying the weight of 12 years and 2 changed lives. Lyra and one found a quiet corner where 2 chairs faced a window overlooking the night sky of. The twin moons hung low on the horizon, casting silver light across the city below. Neither of them wanted to leave. There was too much to say, too many years to fill. One spoke slowly, carefully choosing his words. He was not a man who shared easily, but something about Lyra, about the impossible fact of her sitting across from him, opened doors he had kept locked for a long time. "After Prime, the war continued for 2 more years," he said. "We fought across a dozen worlds. I lost many friends, good soldiers, better men than me." He paused, staring at his hands. When the peace treaty was signed, I did not know what to do with myself. I had been fighting for so long that I forgot how to stop. Lyra listened without interrupting. She understood something of what he meant. The refugee camps had taught her that surviving was different from living. They offered me a promotion, one continued. Security detail, protecting diplomats instead of killing enemies. I took it because, he stopped, searching for the right words, because I was tired of hurting, tired of watching people die. I thought maybe if I could keep people safe, it would balance something. Balance what? Lyra asked softly. He looked at her then, and his eyes held a weight she recognized. It was the same weight she saw in the eyes of other survivors, the ones who had lost family on Prime. I do not know, he admitted. Maybe nothing. Maybe I was just looking for a reason to keep going. Lyra reached out and touched his hand. It was a small gesture, but it carried 12 years of gratitude. You are the reason I kept going, she said. When I was in the camps, alone and afraid, I would hold that patch and remember what you said. Close your eyes, I have you. You are safe. She paused, steadying her voice. Those words saved me more times than you will ever know. One turned his hand over and held hers. His grip was gentle, almost hesitant. I carried you for less than an hour, he said. It was nothing. Lyra shook her head firmly. It was everything. Do not say it was nothing. The soldiers walked past my hiding place twice before you came. They were looking for survivors to kill if you had been a few minutes later. She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Silence fell between them, but it was a comfortable silence, the kind shared by people who understood each other without needing to explain. Tell me about your life, one said finally. After the ship took you away, what happened? Lyra leaned back in her chair and looked up at the moons. The ship took us to a refugee station on the edge of space. It was crowded and dirty and frightening. I spent 3 weeks there before anyone found my records. My mother had survived. She was on a different ship. They reunited us. She smiled at the memory, but the smile was tinged with sadness. My father did not survive, she continued. He died in the first attack trying to protect our home. My mother and I came here too. We had relatives who took us in. I went to school. I studied hard. I wanted to understand why species fight each other. I wanted to help build peace so that no other little girl would hide under broken metal while her world burned. One nodded slowly. That is why you work for the foreign ministry. Yes, and that is why I asked to be assigned to your delegation's welcome detail. She smiled again, and this time the sadness was gone. I have been hopping to find you for 12 years. When I heard humans were coming to the summit, I knew I had to try. And here I am, one said. And here you are. They sat together as the hours passed. One told her about Earth, about green forests and blue oceans and cities that touched the clouds. He told her about his mother, who had cried when he enlisted and cried again when he came home. He told her about the small apartment he kept in a city called Seoul, where he spent his leave time walking by the river and trying to remember what peace felt like. Lyra told him about the crystal towers and the singing flowers and the ancient traditions that had survived even the darkest times. She told him about her mother, who had and found happiness again. She told him about the friends she had made, the dreams she carried, and the hope she held for a better future. By the time the first sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they had covered 12 years of separation. The distance between them had shrunk to nothing. One stood and stretched, his joints cracking from sitting too long. The stiffness in his movement was more visible now, and Lyra understood that his injuries from Prime had never fully healed. You should rest, she said. The summit continues today. He nodded, but did not move toward the door. Instead, he looked at her with an expression she could not quite read. I need to tell you something, he said. Something I never told anyone. Lyra waited. That day on Prime, I disobeyed orders to save you, he said. My commander told us to retreat immediately. The area was too dangerous, but I heard you crying and I could not leave." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I was disciplined for it later. They said I put my squad at risk for one child." Lyra felt a cold anger rise in her chest. "They punished you for saving me." "They gave me a warning, nothing serious, but they were right." He met her eyes. "I did put my squad at risk. One of my men was wounded because we stayed too long. He carries that injury to this day." "Do you regret it?" Lyra asked, her voice barely above a whisper. One considered the question carefully. When he spoke, his voice was firm. "No," he said. "I would do it again, 1,000 times. Some things are more important than following orders." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the old patch. He had been holding it all night, turning it over in his fingers. "Keep it," Lyra said. "It belongs to you." One shook his head. He pressed it back into her hand, just as he had pressed it into her palm 12 years ago. "It belongs to you," he said. "It always did. It was never about the patch. It was about what you did with the life I helped you keep." Lyra closed her fingers around the faded fabric. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she was smiling. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." One smiled back. It was the same tired, sad smile she remembered from the burning sky. "Thank you," he replied, "for becoming someone worth saving." Lyra was in the east wing of the Grand Hall, helping to organize documents for the next morning's session. The summit had been going well. Agreements were being reached. Old enemies were finding common ground. For the first time in many years, there was real hope for lasting peace. Then the world exploded. The blast threw Lyra across the room. She hit the floor hard, her ears ringing, her vision blurred. Dust and smoke filled the air. Alarms began screaming. Somewhere in the distance, she heard gunfire. She pushed herself up on shaking arms. The room around her was destroyed. The ceiling had partially collapsed. 3 other staff members lay nearby, wounded but alive. Beyond them, near the blocked doorway, lay a young diplomat named Sun. He was bleeding from a wound on his head but struggling to rise. More explosions shook the building. Through the broken windows, Lyra could see ships in the sky, small attack craft bearing no official markings. She understood immediately what was happening. Extremists. Fanatics who wanted to destroy the peace summit and reignite the wars. Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Lyra heard voices speaking in the harsh language. These were not diplomats. These were soldiers, and they were hunting survivors. The blocked doorway was the only exit. The attackers would be through it in moments. Lyra looked at the wounded people around her. They could not run. They could barely move. If she left them, they would die. She did not leave. Instead, she grabbed Sun's arm and pulled him toward a heavy desk that had fallen against the wall. She pushed him behind it, then helped the other 3 into the same hiding space. It was not good cover. It would not stop bullets, but it was all she had. The doorway burst open. 3 soldiers stormed in, weapons raised. They wore no official insignia. Their armor was black and unmarked. These were the extremists, the ones who believed that war was the only path and peace was weakness. Lyra stood up from behind the desk. The soldiers aimed their weapons at her. One of them, the leader, was an older with a face and cold eyes. He looked at Lyra with the same expression she had seen on faces 12 years ago on Prime. "Where are the human delegates?" he demanded. "I do not know," Lyra said. Her voice was steady, even though her hearts were pounding with terror. "This is an administrative area. No delegates here." The leader stepped closer. His weapon did not waver. "You are lying," he said. "We have information that human security officers were stationed in this wing." He smiled, and it was an ugly thing. "We have special plans for the humans. They should not have come here. They should have stayed on their little planet and left the galaxy to those who belong in it." He raised his weapon toward Lyra's head. The wall behind them exploded inward. One came through the opening like a force of nature. He moved faster than Lyra had ever seen a being move. His first shot took down the soldier on the left. His second took down the soldier on the right. The leader spun to face him, but one was already there, knocking the weapon aside and driving his fist into his throat. The leader staggered back, choking. One did not give him time to recover. He struck again and again, precise and brutal, until the fell and did not rise. 3 more human soldiers poured through the hole in the wall. They secured the room in seconds, checking the wounded and covering the entrances. One turned to Lyra. His face was covered in dust and blood. His uniform was torn, but his eyes were the same eyes that had found her under the broken shuttle. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "No," Lyra managed. "How did you know?" "I was checking the staff locations when the attack started. Your name was on the list for this wing." He paused, catching his breath. "I was not going to let it happen again. Not to you." More explosions echoed through the building. The attack was still ongoing. "We need to move," one of the other soldiers said. "The extraction point is on the roof. Security is clearing a path." One nodded. He looked at the wounded, then at Sun, the young diplomat who was still hiding behind the desk. "Can they walk?" he asked Lyra. "2 of them can. The others need to be carried." One made quick decisions. He assigned his soldiers to carry the wounded. Then he looked at Sun, who was watching with wide, frightened eyes. "What about him?" one of the soldiers asked. "He is a diplomat," Lyra said firmly. "He is not one of them. He came to this summit to support peace. His own people will kill him for that." One studied the young for a moment. Sun met his gaze without looking away. "Can you walk?" one asked. Sun nodded. "Then stay close. We protect everyone." They moved through the ruined building in a tight group. One led the way, his weapon ready. Twice they encountered enemy soldiers. Twice one cut them down before they could fire. He moved like a man who had done this 1,000 times, which he had. They reached a stairwell that led to the roof. Halfway up, they ran into a larger group of attackers. A firefight erupted in the narrow space. One pushed Lyra behind him and fired into the enemy ranks. A bullet caught him in the shoulder. He grunted but did not fall. Another hit him in the leg. He dropped to one knee but kept firing. "Go," he shouted at the others. "Get to the roof." "I am not leaving you," Lyra screamed. One looked at her, and for one moment time seemed to stop. She saw something in his eyes that she had not seen before. Not fear, acceptance. He was ready to die to save them. But Lyra was not the helpless child she had been 12 years ago. She grabbed a weapon from one of the fallen attackers. She did not know how to use it properly. She did not care. She stepped up beside one and fired into the enemy ranks. Her shots were wild, but they provided cover. The other human soldiers. Together, they pushed through the attackers and reached the roof. A transport ship was waiting. Security forces held a perimeter. One by one, they loaded the wounded aboard. One could barely stand. Lyra put his arm around her shoulders and helped him toward the ship. His blood soaked into her dress, but she did not let go. "Stubborn," he muttered through gritted teeth, "just like I remember." "You taught me," she replied. The leader appeared at the rooftop entrance. He had survived. He raised his weapon toward one and Lyra. One was faster. Despite his wounds, he drew his sidearm and fired a single shot. The leader fell and did not move. "That one said quietly, was there. On Prime, he gave the orders. I recognized his face." Lyra said nothing. She just held him and helped him onto the ship. The doors closed. The ship rose into the sky. Below them, the Grand Hall burned, just as Prime had burned 12 years before. But this time, Lyra was not a helpless child being carried to safety. This time, she had helped carry someone else. The summit had resumed in a temporary location. The extremists had failed. Instead of destroying the peace process, their violence had united the delegates more strongly than before. Agreements that might have taken months were reached in days. The galaxy, it seemed, was tired of war. Sun, the young diplomat Lyra had protected, became an unexpected voice for change. He spoke before the full assembly about what he had witnessed, a human soldier risking his life to save people of every species, including. He called for his people to reject the extremists and embrace a new path. Many listened. Lyra visited one every day in the medical center. His injuries were serious but not fatal. The doctors said he would recover fully, though the process would take time. He complained about being stuck in bed, which Lyra took as a good sign. On the seventh day, she found him sitting up, looking out the window at the crystal towers of. "You should be resting," she said. "I have been resting for a week," he replied. "I am going to lose my mind if I rest any more." She sat in the chair beside his bed, the same chair she had occupied for hours each day since the attack. They had talked about many things during those visits, old memories and new dreams, the past they shared and the future they hoped for. "The transport ship back to Earth leaves tomorrow," one said. His voice was neutral, but she heard something underneath it, something heavy. Lyra nodded. She had known this moment was coming. It did not make it easier. "Will you be able to travel?" she asked. "The doctors say I should stay another week, but I have convinced them to let me go. The delegation needs its security chief, even a wounded one." He paused. "Besides, I do not like hospitals." Silence fell between them, the kind of silence that holds too many unspoken words. "I have something for you," Lyra said finally. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small package wrapped in silver cloth. One took it carefully. His hands were bandaged, but he managed to unwrap it. Inside was a patch. It was newly made, crafted by artisans using the finest materials. The design showed Earth with wings, just like his old military patch. But this one was different. Around the Earth, a circle of stars glowed in different colors. Blue for the, gray for the, gold for the others. All the species touched by humanity's presence in the galaxy. "I had it made," Lyra said, "to remind you." "Remind me of what?" "Of what humans do, of what you did." She leaned forward, her silver eyes meeting his dark ones. "You saved one child on Prime. That child grew up to save others. Tonight, somewhere in the galaxy, someone is alive because of a choice you made 12 years ago. And tomorrow they will save someone else. And it will continue on, rippling outward forever." One stared at the patch. She saw his jaw tighten, saw the emotion he was fighting to control. "This is what humanity brings to the galaxy," Lyra continued. "Not just your ships and your weapons, your compassion, your conscience, your willingness to do what is right even when it is hard, even when no one is watching, even when it costs you everything." She smiled. "The galaxy needs that. The galaxy needs you." One was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "I am just one soldier. I am not special." "Every soldier is one soldier," Lyra replied. "Every act of kindness is one act, but they add up, they multiply, they change the universe." She took his hand. "You changed my universe." He turned his hand over and held hers. His grip was firm despite his injuries. "I do not know how to say thank you for this," he said, looking at the patch. "Then do not say it, just remember it. When you are back on Earth, when you are walking by your river, when you wonder if any of it mattered." She squeezed his hand. "It mattered, you matter." One lifted the patch and looked at it again. The stars around Earth seemed to glow in the afternoon light. "I will come back," he said suddenly, "for the next summit. They will need security again and I will volunteer." Lyra felt her heart skip. "You do not have to do that." "I know I want to." He met her eyes. "And maybe when my service is done I will come back for longer if you would want that." "I would want that," Lyra said softly, "very much." They sat together as the suns began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Tomorrow he would leave. Tomorrow she would stand at the landing pad and watch his ship rise into the sky, just as he had once watched hers. But this was not an ending. They both knew that now. Some connections are stronger than distance, deeper than time. Some bonds once formed cannot be broken. One looked at her, this woman who had been a child when he found her, who had carried his memory across years and light years, who had become living proof that compassion matters. "Thank you," he said, "for remembering me." "Thank you," she replied, "for being worth remembering." The next morning, Lyra stood at the landing pad as the human delegation prepared to depart. One walked slowly, still healing, but he walked on his own. He wore his uniform with the new patch displayed proudly on his chest. At the bottom of the boarding ramp, he turned to face her one last time. Around them, diplomats and staff hurried about their business, but the two of them stood still in the middle of the movement. One raised his hand, just as he had raised it 12 years ago when the doors of the refugee ship closed between them. Lyra raised hers in return. No words were needed. Everything had already been said. He turned and walked up the ramp. The doors closed. The ship's engines hummed to life. Lyra watched as it rose into the morning sky, climbing higher and higher until it was just a point of light among the stars. She did not look away until it disappeared completely. Then she lowered her hand and smiled. In her pocket, the old patch rested beside the new one she had kept for herself, identical to the one she had given him. Earth with wings, surrounded by stars, a reminder of what humans could be at their best. A reminder of what one act of kindness could become. She turned and walked back toward the city, toward her work, toward the future. There was much to do, a galaxy to help heal, a peace to build. And somewhere across the stars, a human soldier carried a piece of her with him, just as she carried a piece of him. They would meet again, she was certain of it. Some stories do not end. They just pause, waiting for the next chapter to begin. And theirs was only getting started.